Black
told you to stay
CEO
away from my
mocked
family.
by white
You think
female
you can just waltz in
CEO
here
at
and ruin
Billionaire
everything?
Gala minutes.
Shouldn't
Later,
have come tonight.
she kills the
It's a trap, they know everything.
$49B deal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. Her voice split the gala in half. A farm girl at our gala? The words came sharp, bright, and loud enough to slice through the string quartet in the corner. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Champagne flutes hovered in the air, and every head at the investors' table turned toward the woman in the white dress, the only one who didn't flinch. She sat perfectly still, a calm center in a storm she didn't create. The ballroom glowed in soft blue tones, chandeliers trembling with reflected light, tuxedos, velvet gowns, pearls, everything about the Billionaire Gala screamed curated luxury. But the tension now spreading through the room, that was raw, unpolished, and entirely intentional. Across the table, the blonde woman in the red dress leaned forward, elbows on linen, incredulous. "You must be lost," she said, gesturing openly, dramatically, performing for the crowd. "This table is for actual power players." A few men around her smirked. One whispered, "Bold move showing up like that." Another chuckled, "Who invited her?" The black woman in white, back straight, chin steady, simply watched them. No blinking, no shrinking, no explanation. And that made them even louder. "You're what? Somebody's plus one?" The woman in red pressed on. "Or did you wander in from the kitchen? I mean, sweetie, this is a $4.9 billion table. People who sit here run empires." She smiled like she'd landed a knockout punch. But the woman in white didn't move, didn't give her the satisfaction of a flinch. The room wasn't quiet anymore. It was charged. Before the moment stretched too thin, the narrator in your feed comes in soft, steady, guiding. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Maya. Because Maya Coleman, quiet, regal, self-contained, had just become the center of the richest room in the city. And the woman in red wasn't done. "I mean, seriously," she laughed, waving her hand. "A farm girl at a billionaire gala, in a simple dress with no branding, no entourage, no name badge?" She sat back smugly. "You can't seriously think you belong at this table." Across the room, the quartet faltered for half a beat. Someone at the next table lifted their phone, subtle, curious. Someone else whispered, "This is going to end badly," for someone. But Maya remained still. Her dress white, minimal, elegant, made her stand out even more among jewel-toned gowns. But it wasn't the fabric that made the room hum. It was the silence around her, the self-possession, the refusal to be dragged down into someone else's insecurity. Then, from behind, a young waiter barely 22, carrying a tray of crystal water glasses, hesitated. He stammered, looking from Maya to the woman in red. "Ma'am, her name Maya Coleman. It's actually printed on the principal guest list." His manager shot him a warning glare, but it was too late. A ripple moved across the table, a shift, a crack. The woman in red laughed, shrill and dismissive. "Oh, honey, those lists get printed wrong all the time, trust me. Someone like her isn't sitting at the negotiation table for a $4.9B acquisition." She leaned in again, face closer, tone colder. "Let me help you before you embarrass yourself any further." Maya finally blinked, and the room held its breath, because the last time someone tried to remove her from a room she belonged in, she was 24, dressed in a navy suit, 2 sizes too big, being told she didn't look like someone who attended investment summits. She remembered that humiliation like a bruise under the skin, one that never fully faded. Tonight, she wasn't 24. She wasn't uncertain. She wasn't small. She lifted her hands slow, controlled, and reached for her phone. One quiet motion, but it was enough to make the entire table straighten. And the woman in red didn't know it yet. But the turning point of her life had just begun. The laughter didn't fade. It thickened, a slow ripple of smirks, half hidden behind champagne flutes, spread across the table as if the humiliation were a form of entertainment. The woman in the red dress, still glowing under the chandelier's warm light, leaned back casually, confident that the room was already on her side. Across from her, Maya didn't move. She simply lowered her gaze to the linen tablecloth, not in shame, but in calculation, like someone measuring the temperature of a room before deciding which part of it to burn down. The man seated to Maya's left, a CFO from a mid-sized tech company, cleared his throat, awkwardly adjusting his cufflinks. He glanced toward the blonde woman in red, as if silently asking her to stop. She didn't. Instead, she lifted her glass, swirled the champagne, and said loudly enough for 3 tables to hear, "Imagine thinking you can sit at the principal investor's table with whatever that dress is. It's giving bridesmaid from a budget wedding." Behind her, 2 men snorted. A woman covered her mouth, torn between amusement and discomfort. But the young waiter, the same one who'd spoken up earlier, stayed frozen at Maya's shoulder, tray trembling slightly. He looked at her the way a person looks at lightning caught in a bottle. Rare, dangerous, magnificent. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he whispered, voice low. "I didn't know they'd—" Maya turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. "I know," she said softly, and he stood a little taller. But the red-dressed CEO wasn't done poisoning the air. She leaned forward again, elbows on the polished table. "You know what this reminds me of?" she said. "Last year in Aspen, where some influencer tried to sneak into the auction dinner. Same vibe. Sweet girl, wrong room." Another ripple of laughter. Someone muttered, "What's security even doing?" Another chimed in, "This is why these galas need better screening." The words didn't strike Maya like wounds. They slid off her like rain on marble. But in the quiet corners of her mind, something hardened. Because this wasn't the first time she'd been told she didn't fit a room she'd built her career to enter. When she was 27, at an investor brunch in San Francisco, a man had mistaken her for staff, handed her his coat and said, "Steam this, will you?" She returned it perfectly pressed, right before announcing her firm's acquisition of his startup. Tonight felt the same. Different city, different dress code, same energy. She exhaled once. Slow, controlled. The waiter noticed it the moment when silence shifts from patience to decision. And the woman in red noticed too. "Oh, don't do that," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Don't act like you're above us. You're here because someone made a mistake. And honestly, they should fix it." She snapped her fingers at the nearest coordinator. A snap, like she was calling a dog. "Can you escort her to general seating?" the red-dressed CEO ordered. "We have important matters to discuss, and this," she gestured lazily toward Maya, "isn't one of them." Maya finally lifted her chin, just an inch. But the entire room felt it. Because her eyes weren't angry. They were steady. Too steady. The kind of steady that precedes a shift in power. The coordinator took one hesitant step toward her. Just one. Then stopped because the lights above the table flickered. Not dramatically, but briefly, like someone backstage had just activated something. Maya set her phone on the table, screen down. A quiet signal. And that was when the red-dress CEO's confidence faltered, just a hairline crack, but enough for her mascaraed eyes to tighten at the edges. What was that?" she asked. Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to, because something had begun moving behind the scenes quietly, efficiently, and entirely at her command. And the room, suddenly, knew it. The crack in her confidence widened. Just a flicker of lights, a subtle shift in air pressure, nothing most guests would notice. But the woman in the red dress felt it. Power recognizes power, even before the mind does. She straightened, glass trembling slightly in her hand. "Okay, what's going on?" she asked, trying to laugh it off. "Is this some kind of dramatic exit? Because, sweetheart, you don't need mood lighting to leave the wrong table." But no one laughed this time. A slow, creeping awareness passed through the circle. Something unseen had entered the conversation. At the far end of the ballroom, a coordinator checked her tablet, her eyebrows snapping upward. She whispered something into her earpiece, face draining. Another coordinator hurried toward the event director, urgency written in her stride. The shift was small, private, quiet, but Maya saw it all. Across the table, the CFO, who'd been adjusting his cufflinks, leaned forward. "Is something happening?" he murmured. The red-dressed CEO scoffed loudly, needing the room to hear her confidence. "Oh, please, the only thing happening is this woman needs to be reseated. It's not complicated." But her voice wavered, one note off-key. Then came the whisper carried through the gala like a breeze. "Deal frozen? Who froze it?" Not possible. It's her? It came from her authorization? Check again, check again. The woman in the red dress turned sharply. Who said that? She scanned the room. Who the hell said that? A man, 2 tables over, slowly lowered his phone, eyes widening at the message on his screen. He glanced at Maya, then back at the red-dress CEO, and stood. Victoria, he said, addressing her by name for the first time. You might want to sit down. She laughed. Loud, too loud. Sit down. For her? Are you joking? She doesn't even belong at... But before she could finish, the event director approached at a brisk but reluctant pace. Her steps were firm, but her expression was pale, strained like someone forced to deliver news that reshapes a room. Miss Coleman, she said to Maya, voice respectful, almost reverent. We received confirmation. Your directive has been acknowledged by the acquisition board. The table went still. The red-dress CEO blinked, disoriented. Her directive? Her voice cracked. What directive? What board? The event director swallowed hard. The $4, 9B acquisition negotiation has been placed on indefinite hold, effective immediately, pending your final review. A single champagne flute slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the marble floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Victoria's face drained of color. What do you mean her review? A silence spread so heavy the musicians stopped mid-note. The director cleared her throat. I mean the review of the woman whose fund is buying your company. Gasps swept the table. Victoria stumbled back in her chair, gripping the edge like the room was tilting. No, this is wrong. This doesn't make sense. She's no one. Her voice rose in panic. She's dressed like... And then her eyes finally met Maya's. And she saw it. The stillness that wasn't weakness. The simplicity that wasn't poverty. The silence that wasn't submission. It hit her like a slap she never saw coming. You, she whispered. You're the principal investor? Maya didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her phone buzzed on the table, one vibration, deliberate, like a heartbeat. The waiter standing behind her inhaled sharply. The CFO whispered, Oh my God. Victoria's mouth fell open, but no words came out, because the room finally understood. The most powerful person in the gala was the woman they tried to push out of her chair, and she had just taken the first step toward turning the entire evening upside down. The silence broke first at the edge of the table. A soft, nervous inhale. The young waiter who had been trying to shrink into the shadows stepped forward as if pulled by something larger than courage. His tray lowered, his shoulders squared, and for the first time since the night began, every spotlight in the ballroom seemed to find him. Ma'am, he said, voice cracking but determined. I need to say something. Victoria whipped around, eyes sharp, wounded, desperate for control. Oh, don't start, she snapped. You've done enough. Stay out of matters you don't understand. But he didn't back away this time. He looked at Maya, then at the event director, then at the entire table, watching him like a trembling thread between two storms. I saw her name, he said, louder now, breath steadying. On this morning's list, on the investor tier, not as a guest, as the principal. The murmurs tightened into a single gasp. Victoria's face twisted. You're mistaken, you don't know what. I do, he cut in gently. Because I asked. I thought the name looked familiar, so I checked twice. Maya studied him, not surprised, not emotional, but with a quiet acknowledgement and unspoken gratitude. The waiter swallowed hard. And I heard what you said to her, he continued, voice trembling with truth. I shouldn't have, but I did, and it wasn't right. Victoria slammed her palms onto the table. Enough. You're a server. Your job is to carry glasses, not comment on things far above your pay grade. A few guests recoiled at the venom in her tone. The event director stepped between them immediately. Victoria, she said firmly, that's enough. But the waiter wasn't finished. He inhaled through his nose, grounding himself, then spoke the sentence that cracked the remaining facade of the room. She didn't walk into the wrong room tonight. He turned toward Maya. You all did. A stunned silence flooded the table. Someone whispered, He's right. Another murmured, This is bad for Victoria. A third simply stared at Maya in awe, as if seeing her for the first time. Victoria's eyes darted wildly, searching for an ally, a lifeline, a reality where she still held the upper hand. But the power in the room had shifted. Away from her. Away from the mocking smiles. Toward the woman in white and the quiet witness who refused to stay silent. And as the waiter stood beside Maya, trembling but resolute, the entire ballroom understood. This story wasn't just about power. It was about the moment someone finally said the truth out loud. The ballroom held its breath. Victoria's painted smile had collapsed into something tighter, sharper, an expression built from panic and pride fraying at the edges. She pushed back from the table, chair legs screeching across marble. "No," she hissed, voice trembling. "No, this isn't real. She can't be." Her breath hitched. "Someone verify this. Now." But no one moved. The room wasn't hers anymore. She swung toward the event director. "Well, do something?" The director didn't. Couldn't. She simply looked at Maya with the kind of respect reserved for people who sign checks with more zeros than a man can count. And that was when Victoria snapped. She marched around the table, heels striking the floor like accusations, stopping right in front of Maya, too close, too hostile. The chandeliers above reflected in her furious eyes. "You're lying," she spat. "You're pretending to be someone important. You waltz in here with a plain dress and... Her voice escalated. "You're a fraud." The final word landed like a slap, but Maya's face didn't change, not even a flicker. Instead, something inside her rewound. A memory, sharp, cold, unforgettable, pulled her backward 12 years. She was 25, standing in a hotel lobby in Chicago, a tailored navy suit, a leather folder of her first investment proposal, hope so new it still trembled, and a manager who looked her up and down and said, "Sweetheart, this area is for attendees. If you're looking for housekeeping, try the service hall." She remembered how her hands shook as she walked back outside into the winter air. She remembered sitting on a bench, staring at her reflection in the glass doors, wondering how many rooms she'd have to be kicked out of before one finally let her in. That night she made a promise to herself. One day they wouldn't refuse her entry. One day she would own the entire building. The flashback snapped, and she was back at the gala, still seated, still steady, staring up at Victoria as if studying a mistake she'd already solved. "If you touch me," Maya said quietly, "you'll regret it." Victoria scoffed. "You think I'm afraid of you?" But the confidence was hollow now. Everyone heard it. She reached out one impulsive, reckless gesture and brushed at the shoulder of Maya's dress as if trying to physically remove her from the table. Gasps broke in every direction. The waiter stiffened. The CFO whispered, "Oh no." The event director stepped forward too late. Maya didn't rise. She didn't recoil. She simply said, "Protocol Vega, Phase 2, her voice barely above a whisper. But it carried. What does Phase 2 even mean?" she demanded, voice cracking. No one answered her. They couldn't. Because their own devices were vibrating with notifications, they didn't understand alerts, flags, internal memos forwarded from assistants who suddenly looked terrified. At the far end of the room, a man in a charcoal suit, the chairman of one of the partnering firms, rose to his feet, scanning the crowd, searching for Maya with the intensity of someone trying to locate the epicenter of an earthquake. His eyes found her instantly, and he paled. "Maya Coleman is here," he whispered. "Tonight? And nobody told me?" Another voice chimed in from somewhere near the bar. "She delayed the acquisition herself? Why would she do that? What did Victoria do?" Victoria spun, overwhelmed by voices that no longer aligned with her version of reality. This has nothing to do with me," she stammered. "She's blowing things out of proportion. I didn't know she isn't even dressed like what?" came a quiet voice behind her. She turned. It was the young waiter. Shaking, but unbroken. "Like someone with power?" he asked. "Is that what you meant?" Victoria's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted desperately for backup, but the guests who once smirked with her now avoided her gaze entirely, as if proximity to her might pull them into the fallout. And Maya? She finally rose from her chair. Slow, elegant, unhurried. The room reacted the way crowds react when royalty stands instinctively straightening, instinctively falling silent. Victoria stumbled back 2 steps as if Maya's calm were something physical pushing her away. You can't do this," she whispered. "You can't just freeze deals. You can't—" "I already did." Maya didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The simplicity of the words landed harder than a shout. Across the ballroom, a cluster of managing partners huddled around a tablet, scrolling urgently through the sequence of commands. Phase 2 authorization, digital locks, automatic holds, timestamps bearing Maya's credentials. "This is real," one murmured. She's the principal. She controls the fund. She controls everything. Victoria swayed, gripping the back of a chair to steady herself. You're insane, she breathed. You're actually insane if you think... But her words cut short when Maya stepped within arm's length, no threat in her posture, yet more power in her stillness than Victoria had wielded all night. Let me be clear, Maya said softly. You misjudged me because you needed to. Because the alternative that a black woman in a simple white dress holds more authority than you was too much for your ego to accept. Victoria's jaw clenched. That's not true, Maya continued, unshaken. You didn't question my place at this table. You questioned my existence in your hierarchy. A low murmur rolled through the guests like thunder under their breath. Victoria covered her mouth with a trembling hand. Her mascara had started to smudge. You don't understand, she whispered, shaking her head. I didn't know who you were. Maya tilted her head. That's the problem, Victoria. You never needed to know who I was to treat me with basic respect. The words landed with surgical precision. Victoria froze, and somewhere deep inside the ballroom, something finally broke, not in Maya, but in the illusion that had protected Victoria's arrogance for far too long. For a moment, no one breathed. Victoria stood rigid, mascara trembling at the corners of her eyes, chest rising unevenly. The lights overhead glinted off her red dress, but the color had drained completely from her face. Around her, guests leaned in, not out of curiosity, but gravity pulled by the inevitability of what came next. Maya remained perfectly still, not triumphant, not emotional, just inevitable. What are you saying? Victoria stammered. You're trying to humiliate me. Maya shook her head once, slow and deliberate. No, she said, you did that part on your own. The words echoed with a calm finality that made the room tighten. Behind them, the event director's earpiece crackled. Ma'am, Phase 2 confirms full freeze. The board is requesting Miss Coleman's presence. They're asking if she intends to move forward with a dismissal. A collective gasp. Dismissal? Someone whispered. Is she talking about Victoria? Oh my God, she has the authority to fire board members? Victoria stumbled back, gripping the table. You can't. You don't have that kind of power, she cried. But a man in a navy tuxedo, one of Victoria's own investors, stepped forward. She does, he said quietly. I just got the internal notice. She's the principal investor. Her fund holds majority leverage over the acquisition, and the negotiation team reports directly to her. Silence snapped through the room. Victoria's knees nearly buckled. No, she whispered, shaking her head violently. You're tricking me. She's nobody. She came in alone. She wore a dress that... A dress, Maya repeated softly, does not determine worth. Victoria choked on her breath. Then what? What determines yours? She fired back, desperate. Money? Influence? You think that lets you walk in here and act superior? Maya stepped closer. So close, Victoria had no choice but to meet her eyes. It's not superiority, Maya said quietly. It's accountability. The waiter still standing near Maya exhaled shakily. Guests around him nodded, murmuring agreement. Victoria's voice cracked, sharp and thin. You think this is accountability? Destroying my deal? My reputation? Maya held her gaze. You destroyed those yourself, she replied. All I did was stop you from profiting off the very people you thought were beneath you. The words hit harder than any raised voice could have. A man from another table murmured, This is the most deserved downfall I've ever seen. Another whispered, I can't believe she said that to the principal investor. Victoria's breathing turned shallow. It was a misunderstanding, she whispered, eyes darting wildly. I didn't know who you were. If I had... That's the point, Maya cut in gently but unflinchingly. You would have treated me differently, only if you knew my power. The truth hung heavy. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Several lowered their eyes. A few looked ashamed, as if recognizing their own reflections in Victoria's behavior. Maya continued. You offered respect selectively. You offered dignity conditionally. You offered humanity based on appearances. And that, she said, voice lowering to a razor's calm, is exactly why you no longer deserve your seat at the negotiating table. Victoria's lip quivered. You can't remove me. Ugh. Maya looked at the event director. Send notice, she said, effective immediately. The director nodded, already lifting her tablet. Victoria inhaled sharply, a short, broken sound. No, please, don't. Maya didn't look away. It's done. The ballroom watched the moment a titan of arrogance collapsed, not through shouting, nor violence, nor spectacle, but through the quiet, surgical precision of a woman who no longer needed permission to belong. It happened slowly, then all at once. The event director's fingers brushed across her tablet, sending the notice through the internal system. A soft chime echoed from devices around the ballroom, a notification sound so subtle most guests might have ignored it on any other night. But tonight, every single chime felt like a gavel striking. Victoria froze as the faces around her shifted recognition, shock, then something worse, disappointment. Her own colleagues backed away, a silent instinct to avoid the blast radius. Eyes that once worshipped her status now watched her like a warning. A man in a tailored gray suit stepped forward, one of the senior partners from the acquiring board. "Victoria," he said quietly, "your clearance credentials, they've been revoked." Her breath caught. "Revoked? What do you mean revoked? That's impossible. I'm a seated CEO. I'm a lead negotiator." She laughed, a broken, brittle sound. This is a mistake." The partner shook his head. "Your dismissal was authorized by the primary fund. With majority leverage, Miss Coleman's decision is final." A whisper swept through the ballroom like a gust of cold air. She really fired her. On the spot, in front of everyone. She deserved it. Victoria's legs buckled. She grabbed onto the back of a chair, knuckles white. No, you don't understand," she pleaded, voice unraveling. "This isn't fair. She can't do this. She can't just walk in here and—" "Walk in where she has every right to be," the waiter said, unable to stop himself. Heads turned toward him, shock, admiration, and something like collective agreement. Even Maya's gaze softened for a moment. Victoria turned toward him with a look of devastation. "This is your fault too," she snapped. "You humiliated me. You sided with her." "I sided with the truth," he said. Then, quieter, "I sided with dignity." The words hit harder than intended. Victoria staggered, her breath thin and uneven. I've spent 15 years building this company," she whispered. "You can't take that from me. You can't." Maya stepped closer, not cruel, not triumphant, simply unshakable. "I didn't take anything," she said. "I protected a deal that deserved integrity." Tears welled in Victoria's eyes, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I didn't mean I wasn't trying, You judged me," Maya said, voice steady, "before I even spoke a word." Victoria bowed her head. A hush fell over the ballroom. Guests shifted with discomfort, shadows of their own biases flickering in their minds. Then, from across the room, another notification chime. Then another. And another. The senior partner looked down at his screen. "The board," he said slowly, "has unanimously moved to dissolve Victoria's negotiating privileges effective tonight." Victoria's shoulders collapsed inward. No, please, not like this." But no one stepped in. No one defended her. No one argued the decision. Her collapse wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cinematic in the way revenge stories usually go. It was quiet. Human. The sound of a woman whose power was built on fragile assumptions finally facing a truth she'd always ignored. Respect isn't owed to status. Respect is owed to people. Maya turned away, the soft rustle of her white dress, the only sound she made as Victoria crumpled into her chair, hands covering her face, the empire she clung to slipping through her fingers like sand. And the ballroom, once indifferent, now watched her with an eerie, unified clarity. This wasn't a downfall. Maya remained standing still, composed, unshaken like the axis the entire night had spun around without realizing it. The event director stepped forward again, posture straight, voice respectful. "Miss Coleman," she said, bowing her head slightly, "the board is asking if you'd like a private room prepared. Security is on standby to escort you if—" "No." Maya's voice was calm, almost gentle. Her eyes traveled the room, meeting every stare head-on. "No escorts, no separation. I'm not the one who needs protection tonight." A ripple passed through the guests, admiration, guilt, awe. Across from her, Victoria still sat hunched over, fingers pressed against her forehead, mascara streaking downward like melting paint. She looked smaller than she ever had, no longer a queen of the gala, but someone realizing, for the first time, how fragile borrowed power can be. A woman from a nearby table rose to her feet. "Miss Coleman," she said carefully, "I want to apologize." She was here because she had earned her place long before the room realized it. Then came the sound that broke the tension completely. Applause. Soft at first, then joined by others, then swelling until the entire ballroom was standing not for spectacle but respect. Victoria flinched at the sound, lifting her head in disbelief. To her, the applause felt like judgment. To Maya, it felt like justice, not the loud, vengeful kind, but the quiet correction of a long-standing imbalance. The waiter stepped closer, standing just behind Maya's shoulder like a soldier guarding something sacred. "You didn't have to do any of this," he said quietly. Maya looked at him with the faintest softness. "I didn't do it for me." He blinked. "For who then?" "For every person who's ever been told they don't belong in a room they earned." His breath caught. He nodded slowly, deeply. The applause continued, filling every corner of the chandelier-lit hall. But Maya's eyes drifted back to Victoria, not with triumph, but with something almost like a lesson delivered. Victoria looked up, eyes red, voice barely a whisper. Why didn't you just tell me who you were?" Maya answered without hesitation. "Because I wanted to see who you were." The room fell silent again, sharp, clean, irrevocable. That sentence struck deeper than any punishment, because it revealed the truth everyone now understood. The real test had never been about Maya's identity. It had always been about Victoria's, and she had failed it long before Maya ever spoke her name. The applause faded slowly, like a tide pulling back from shore, leaving the ballroom washed in a strange mixture of admiration and guilt. The warmth of the clapping didn't erase what everyone had witnessed, it only illuminated it more clearly. Victoria sat motionless, staring at nothing, her breath shallow. The red dress that once commanded attention now looked like an empty costume, loud, bright, hollow. Her phone buzzed weakly in her clutch. She didn't move. Another buzz, then another. Finally, trembling, she lifted it only to see the notification glowing across the screen. Access revoked. Executive privileges suspended. Temporary removal pending review. She blinked at it. Once. Twice. As if the words would change form if she stared long enough. This can't be happening," she whispered to no one. But the ballroom heard her anyway. A partner from her own company approached, slow, cautious, as though stepping toward a wounded animal. "Victoria," he said softly, "there will be an internal hearing. The board wants you to take some time off." "Time off?" She laughed, a brittle, cracking sound. "You mean exile, don't sugarcoat it." He didn't deny it. Behind them, two younger associates whispered, "She really lost everything in one night." No, she lost it the moment she opened her mouth. Victoria shut her eyes, each breath visibly painful. Meanwhile, Maya stood a few feet away, still, centered, an unmoved pillar in the storm she had every right to command. The event director approached her. "Miss Coleman, the board is waiting. Do you want security to remove Victoria from the premises?" Maya's gaze drifted to the woman slumped at the table. "No," she said. "One humiliation tonight was enough." A ripple of respect moved through the crowd. She wasn't here to destroy. She was here to demonstrate. The director nodded, relieved. Victoria looked up, then eyes red, voice barely holding together. "Why?" she whispered. "After everything I said, why show me mercy?" Maya met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "Because consequences aren't cruelty," she said quietly. "And mercy isn't forgiveness." The room absorbed the words like scripture. And as Maya turned toward the waiting corridor, the board, the press, the future she left behind, a truth no one in the gala would forget. Power doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes, it only needs to be just. The ballroom shifted again, subtle, instinctive, as Maya stepped away from the table. She didn't rush. She didn't look back. Her white dress moved like a calm wave, parting a sea of shaken egos and humbled tycoons. The guests who once whispered behind half-hidden champagne flutes now stood aside, giving her space the way people do when someone has earned not just respect, but reverence. A woman in emerald silk approached timidly. "Miss Coleman, if you ever consider new partners, my firm—" Maya lifted a hand gently. "No pitches tonight." The woman nodded quickly, stepping back without protest. A pair of young entrepreneurs approached next, eyes bright with something between admiration and awe. "You inspired all of us," one said. "The way you handled everything." "I didn't handle everything," Maya corrected softly. "I handled what mattered." She moved past them, toward the long hallway where the board had gathered. The air grew warmer there, tense with anticipation and urgency. But behind her, the ballroom continued its transformation. People were no longer whispering about her dress, or her seat, or her worth. They whispered about her strength. She stayed calm. She never raised her voice. That's real leadership. And then, someone like her should be running the whole damn thing. The waiter heard it, and he smiled. Nearby, Victoria lifted her face from her hands only to catch the tail end of that sentence. Her expression crumpled further, pain slicing through her arrogance like a final, unkind truth, because the room wasn't hers anymore. Not the attention, not the narrative, not the power. It belonged undeniably, irrevocably to the woman walking steadily toward her future. And for the first time all night, the ballroom understood. Respect wasn't taken from Victoria. It had chosen Maya. Maya reached the threshold, the soft hum of the gala fading behind her. She didn't look back, she didn't need to. The room had already rewritten itself in her image. Before stepping through, she offered one final truth, steady and unmistakable. Power isn't proven by who you silence, but by who you refuse to become. And with that, she walked forward quiet, certain leaving an entire ballroom standing in the echo of her standard.